my dear students. This is Somasundari. Today we are discussing about History Unit 2. The topic is Anti-Colonial Movements and Decolonization Process in Asia. Before starting the class, I will ask few questions from previous topic. Are you ready? Okay. Question number 1. At the end of the First World War, Dash was financially in the sound position. At the end of the First World War, Dash was financially in a sound position. Answer is USA. Question number 2. US stock market crash in Dash. US stock market crash in Dash. Answer is 1929. Question number 3. In England, Labour Party was defeated in the general elections of Dash. In England, Labour Party was defeated in the general elections of Dash. Answer is 1931. Question number 4. When was Fascist Party founded? When was Fascist Party founded? Answer is 1919. Question number 5. When was Mussolini invaded Ethiopia? When was Mussolini invaded Ethiopia? Answer is 1935. Students, I hope you are all got correct answer, isn't it? Well done. Now we are going to today's topic, anti-colonial movements and decolonization process in Asia. Now I'll explain French Indochina rise of anti-colonialism. What is the meaning of anti-colonialism? Anti-colonialism means the struggle against imperial rule in colonized countries. Anti-colonialism as a historical event took many different forms across the world. Indochina had shown its discontent right from the beginning of the French occupation. While the Indochinese resisted the imposition of French language and culture, they learned from the ideas of revolution. During the First World War, about 100,000 Indo-Chinese fought in France and returned the first-hand knowledge of how the French had fought and suffered during the war. Communist ideas from mainland China were also a major influence. Many became convinced that the considerable wealth of Indochina was benefiting only the colonial power. At the turn of the 20th century, growing nationalism led to sporadic violent outbursts. In 1916, there was a major anti-colonial revolt which was crushed brutally. There were also guerrilla activities in Tonkin, the place from where Chi Minh was to arrive. Next, the emergence of Vietnam. The mainstream political party in Indochina was the Vietnam Nationalist Party, formed in 1927. When was Vietnam Nationalist Party formed? 1927. It was composed of the wealthy and middle class sections of the population. In 1929, The Vietnamese soldiers mutinied and there was a failed attempt to assassinate the French Governor General. This was followed by a large-scale peasant revolt led by the communists. The revolt was crushed, followed by what is called White Terror. Thousands of rebels were killed. After the White Terror, Chi Minh left for Moscow and spent the 1930s in Moscow and China. When France was defeated by Germany in 1940, Chi Minh and his lieutenants used this turn of events to advance the Vietnamese cause. Crossing over the border into Vietnam in January 1941, they organized the League for the Independence of Vietnam or Viet Minh. This gave renewed emphasis to a distinct Vietnamese nationalism.
Ho Chi Minh, born 19 May 1890 and died 2 September 1969. He was 79. Also known as Uncle Ho or simply Uncle. He was a North Vietnamese revolutionary and politician. He served as Prime Minister of North Vietnam from 1945 to 1955 and President from 1945 to 1969. Ideologically a Marxist-Leninist, he served as Chairman and First Secretary of the Workers' Party of Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh led the Viet Minh independence movement from 1941 onward, establishing the communist-ruled Democratic Republic of Vietnam, North Vietnam, in 1945 and defeating the French Union in 1954 at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, ending the First Indochina War. He was a key figure in the People's Army of Vietnam and the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War, which lasted from 1955 to 1975. North Vietnam was victorious and was reunified with the Republic of South Vietnam in 1976. Saigon, the former capital of South Vietnam, was renamed Ho Chi Minh City in his honor. Ho officially stepped down from power in 1965 due to health problems and died in 1969. Ho Chi Minh's life before he came to power in Vietnam is ambiguous. He is known to have used between 50 to 200 pseudonyms. His birth is subject to academic debate. At least 4 existing official biographies vary on names, dates, places and other hard facts, while unofficial biographies vary even more widely. Aside from being a politician, Ho was also a writer, a poet, and a journalist. He wrote several books, articles and poems in French, Chinese and Vietnamese.
Now, I explain Chi Minh. Chi Minh was born in Tonkin. When Chi Minh was 21, he went to Europe. After working as a cook in a London hotel, he went to Paris. In the Paris Peace Conference, he lobbied for the independence for Vietnam. His articles in newspaper and especially the pamphlet French Colonialism and Trial made him well known as a Vietnam nationalist. In 1921, he became a founder member of the French Communist Party. 2 years later, he went to Moscow and learned revolutionary techniques then. In 1925, he founded the Revolutionary Youth Movement. After the peasant revolt he led was crushed in 1930, he went to Moscow again. Inspired by Mao Zedong, he returned to Indochina. After the Japanese invaded, it organized the communists and carried on his anti-colonial struggle. He also played an inspirational role leading the war against the USA. Next, decolonization in India, diarchy in provinces. The decolonization process started in India from the beginning of the 20th century with the launch of the Swadeshi movement in 1905. The outbreak of the First World War brought about rapid political as well as economic changes. In 1919, the Government of India Act introduced diarchy that provided for elected provincial assemblies as well as for Indian ministers to hold certain portfolios under transferred subjects. The Montagu Declaration read, increasing association of Indians in every branch of the administration and the gradual development of self-government in India as an integral part of British Empire. This measure of the British government was to buy the political peace needed to expand the tax base. The Indian National Congress rejected diarchy and decided to boycott the legislature. Lack of measures to industrialize India. Despite the discriminating production given to certain select industries such as sugar, cement, and chemicals, there was no change in the colonial economic policy. Incentives were provided for the British iron and steel industry by guaranteeing purchasing contracts. But in the case of indigenous industries, support was only in the form of providing technical advice and education and the establishment of pioneer factories in new industries. However, even this policy was soon abandoned as many British enterprises were opposed to this.
In this module, you will learn about the Great Economic Depression. They used to tell me I was building a dream, with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line, just waiting for bread? These lines from the famous song, "Brother, can you spare a dime?" capture the grief and helplessness of Americans during the Great Depression. It began in 1929 with a steep fall in stock values of the New York Stock Exchange and continued well into the mid-1930s. The Depression lasted for almost a decade. These were hard times for people all over the world. Agricultural prices fell. Industrial production came to a halt. And millions of people became jobless and homeless. Overall, the world economy went topsy-turvy. What were the main causes of the Great Depression? The First World War had badly impacted the agricultural economies of Eastern Europe. During the war years, Canada, Australia, and America had emerged as new alternate centers of wheat production. Consequently, there was an overflow of food grains in the market, which led to a fall in the agricultural prices. In order to retain their overall income, farmers decided to bring in more produce to the market. As a result, the market situation worsened, and the agricultural prices fell to an all-time low. During and after the war, the US had emerged as an international money lender. When the US economy was hit by the Depression, it had a domino effect on the rest of the world. The US withdrew loans from other countries, because of which major banks and currencies collapsed in Europe.
Next, India in the days of Great Depression. The Great Depression of 1929 had a disastrous impact on British trade and business. Foreign investment declined, particularly in the heavy industry sector like railway building. For the colonial government, the expansion of trade was the only ideal mode of economy, as it guaranteed easy access to indirect tax revenue and foreign currency. Britain transmitted the effects of depression to its colonies. Bilateral trade treaties between Britain and the member states of British Empire were signed at an economic summit in Ottawa in 1932, in which the participants agreed to give preference to imperial over non-imperial goods. India was forced to adhere to the policy of balancing the budget. The government of British India also raised revenue tariffs mainly to gain foreign currency. Britain's need for gold in the crisis years was met from the export of gold from India. By overvaluing Indian currency, the British made imports cheaper. The currency exchange policy fueled tensions between the colonial government and its subjects and intensified the political agitation against British rule.
Civil disobedience. Mahatma Gandhi agitated against British government by starting another movement, that is, civil disobedience. Civil disobedience means to violate unjust and oppressive laws formed by British government politely. Mahatma Gandhi accelerated civil disobedience movement to decrease the tax on the salt. Every Indian had to bear the load of salt tax. It was also the demand of Congress to cancel the tax of salt. Mahatma Gandhi selected the place Dandi of Gujarat for breaking the salt tax by using passive political resistance movement. Gandhiji started his journey with selected followers on 12th March 1930. Mahatma Gandhi and his followers started the journey from Sabarmati to Dandi and crossed 385 kilometers in 25 days by walking. He violated the law by preparing salt from the seashore of Dandi. Then the movement of civil disobedience started all over India. This movement was a good step. It is described that Gandhiji prepared a handful of salt and castrated the British Empire. Dharasana, passive political resistance, was important in civil disobedience movement. It was led by Sarojini Naidu.
Next, I'll explain impact of depression on Indian agriculture. The Great Depression also dealt a death blow to Indian agriculture and the indigenous manufacturing sector. The value of farm produce declined by half while the land rent to be paid by the peasant remained unchanged. In terms of prices of agriculture commodities, the obligation of the farmers to the state doubled. Farmers and Indian manufacturers therefore had to sell their gold and silver reserves to subsist. The great fall in prices prompted Indian nationalists to demand production for the internal economy. The 1930s saw the emergence of the Indian National Congress as a militant mass movement. The call given by the Congress for a civil disobedience movement evoked tremendous response in rural India. Left radicalism was also very much in evidence. Government of India Act 1935. The British had to appease the Indian nationalists and the outcome was the passage of the Government of India Act 1935. This provided for greater power to the local governments and the introduction of direct elections. In the 1937 elections, the Congress won a resounding victory in most of the provinces. However, the decision to Britain to involve India in the Second World War without consulting the popular Congress ministers forced the latter to resign from office. Due to the global crisis, there was drastic fall in agriculture prices, the mainstay of India's economy, and severe credit contraction occurred as colonial policymakers refused to devalue of rupee. Okay, students, now we are going to end of this session. I hope you are all observing the class properly, isn't it? Well done. Students, today's homework, note it down. Today, I'll give one paragraph question. Detailed question number 2. Attempt a narrative account of how the process of decolonization happened in India during the interwar period. It's very important paragraph question. So, study properly and write 2 times. Children, handwriting is very important. So, you must write 2 times. Don't forget it. Thank you, children. See you next class.